Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into Adana, Turkey. And what's happening there, well, it's pretty wild. It's become a living experiment, showing us how one single city can be split right down the middle into two separate and deeply unequal worlds. Take a look at this number, 1,392 times. And no, that is not a typo. That's the actual income gap between the richest and the poorest households in Adana. According to official statistics, this makes it one of the most unequal cities in all of Turkey. Absolutely staggering. So the big question is, how does something like this even happen? How does a city just break apart? Well, we're going to trace the history of Adana's deep social and physical divide. It's this stark split right along a north-south line, and it's been decades in the making. You know, the story of Adana's Great Divide, it doesn't start with walls or gates. Nope. It starts with something much more fundamental: water, incredibly fertile land, and a massive, massive accumulation of wealth. See, this split didn't just happen overnight. It really kicked off back in the 1950s. The new Seyhan Dam was built, and it created enormous wealth for the region's agricultural elite. But here's the kicker. Instead of reinvesting in the city they already had, they used that capital to fund a mass exodus north. Then, you fast forward to after 1980, and neoliberal policies just pour gasoline on the fire. This trend accelerates, and it becomes more than just a move. It's a cultural mission focused on image, consumption, and exclusivity. But here's a crucial point. Before you can build a physical wall, you first have to build a mental one. This separation wasn't just about geography. It was, and is, all about psychology. And to really get our heads around the mindset behind this, we can turn to the sociologist George Simmel. He coined this term the blasé attitude. Think of it like a mental shield. In a chaotic city, you're just bombarded with sights, sounds, everything, right? So to cope, we might become a little numb, a little indifferent to it all. Now, in Adana, this blasé attitude evolves from just a passive defense mechanism into a full-blown active strategy. It's not just about ignoring chaos anymore. It's about deliberately severing all contact with the other. The city's poor in the south. The city itself gets completely reimagined as just a network of safe, sterile islands that you can hop between, all in an effort to avoid what Max Weber called unwanted association. So you have this mental fortress being built, and it didn't take long at all for it to be cast in concrete and steel. That desire for isolation quickly became a demand for physical security. And the research data here is just crystal clear. The relationship is a straight line. The more money you have, the more you want walls and private guards. For the city's absolute highest earners, private security isn't some luxury add-on, it's a baseline expectation. A staggering 84% of them demand it. You know, ultimately, this goes way beyond simple safety. It represents a fundamental shift in the whole purpose of a neighborhood. The goal is no longer to be part of a vibrant shared community, it's to create a sanctuary, an exclusive, sterile island, and to consciously and deliberately opt out of public life. Of course, if you're going to build these exclusive sanctuaries, you need a justification. You need a story that explains why the walls are necessary. And that story always requires defining the people you're walling yourself off from. And here is that story told in the data. When wealthy residents were asked to define the varosh, the slum areas in the south, the answers were overwhelming. For nearly 65% of them, the term is basically just a synonym for crime. The southern districts aren't seen as neighborhoods with people. They're seen as a criminalized geography. So this perception of the other as a source of crime and chaos isn't just an opinion. It functions as the moral foundation. It's the ethical green light for building walls and creating physical segregation. Fear becomes the justification. This one quote, captured directly from an interview with a wealthy resident, perfectly illustrates the central paradox, the deep contradiction of this entire system. Just think about that for a second. The people from the South are feared as a threat, but they are also needed as a resource. They're essential, but only as an invisible workforce. They aren't seen as neighbors or fellow citizens. No, they are reduced to a service tool, existing only to maintain a comfortable lifestyle for others. What's happening in Adana doesn't just stay in Adana. It's so significant because it completely upends the classic textbook models of how we think cities are supposed to grow and develop. For decades, the dominant theory, Burgess's concentric model, said cities grew outwards in neat rings like a tree. That's the model on the left.
It assumed this was a natural, ecological process of integration. But Adana shows us something radically different, a city actively polarizing, spreading itself along a single line. This isn't natural growth, it's more like social warfare. And honestly, it's exactly what thinkers like Castells and Lefebvre predicted when they warned that post 1980 neoliberal policies would transform cities from places of shared life into arenas of tension.
So, stepping back from Adana, what does this story tell us about the path our own cities are on today? Because it really should be seen as a stark warning. Adana's story isn't some unique, isolated case. It's a playbook for urban division that we can see happening globally. It teaches us that fear can be weaponized in urban planning to justify segregation. It shows that our shared spaces can become battlegrounds for class conflict, that the endless pursuit of a sterile sanctuary only carves deeper fractures into our society. And maybe most importantly, it shows that none of this is possible until you first decide that the people on the other side of the wall are somehow less than human. And so this leaves us with a really critical question. The pursuit of a perfect, sterile sanctuary might feel like an act of freedom, but what is the cost? When we build these walls to keep the other out, while still needing them to come in and service our lives, are we not just locking ourselves in? And in the process, sacrificing the very idea of a shared society?